very unlikely that Anora is not going to clean up at the Oscars. But is the movie worth all this massive award buzz, Dusty? Let's talk about it and see what we have to say. This is directed and written by Sean Baker, and it stars Mikey Madsen as Anora, or Annie, as she goes by in the film. She's an exotic dancer who lives in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Brighton Beach, close to my home. It has a very large, like, Russian immigrant population. And Annie knows some Russian thanks to her Russian grandmother. And one night at work, at the club she works at, she gets a VIP, a Russian named Vanya, who's played by Mark Edelstein. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I probably did. And he's the son of a wealthy oligarch. And she's kind of given the task of taking care of him and his friends. They hit it off. Vanya likes Annie very much, and she likes him too. And he offers to pay her to be his private escort for the week, and she agrees. At one point during the week, he impulsively proposes they get married in Vegas so he could legally live in the United States, and she agrees. And why wouldn't she, really? A rich prince showed up and offered her a glass slipper.
Sure.
So
Yep.
she quits her job as a stripper and goes to live with Vanya in his parents' big Brooklyn mansion. Unfortunately, the fairy tale ending implodes, and his parents find out that he married a stripper slash sex worker, and they go ballistic, and they order escort, and they order his Armenian godfather Toros to find the couple and annul the marriage. And there's some pretty funny and wild shenanigans that take place during this.
This was a great movie. Well written, well acted, well directed, well shot. My only complaint is that it's 2 hours long. I get that you're telling a story. There's like 40 minutes of fucking, and then, 120 minutes of movie. I guess some of that stuff needed to be in there to get the point across, because it's not very subtle in that the messages that it's trying to convey from beginning to end. And it does those things very well. It's a very poignant story. I just don't know that it need to be 2 hours, but I loved it. This was a great film, and I strongly recommend anybody go see it.
I didn't mind the length of it. I mean, if you have wasted time in a movie, it becomes evident. I don't think this movie wasted any of the time.
I felt the first 20 or 30 minutes were a little bit wasted on me. I was watching it, but I was also on my phone a little bit, kind of scrolling social media sometimes, not until paying attention until things started moving forward. The first 40 minutes, there's not a whole lot going on.
Yeah, but that stuff is important, I think, for the payoff, because,
some of it is, yes, but I think you could have got the payoff without as much. But again, I get it, and it didn't bother me too much. It's just, why tell something in 2 hours when you could do it in an hour and a half?
I didn't even feel the time. I was watching. I was having a good time. I was really invested in the story. It's not about a stripper who meets a Russian oligarch and
Correct.
gets married. It's about way more than that. Really, it's about this woman who her whole life has treated sex as a business and transactionally, sort of not really having actual human connection with people.
Right. You're chasing the rainbow.
Yeah. So I think the movie was sort of shot like a roller coaster, in a sense, where it's you have you're introduced to her in a really excellent manner, I thought, because you see the way she operates at work. And, I don't know if you've ever been to a strip club. I've only been ever twice in my whole life, and neither time was enjoyable. But it's they are professional salespeople.
Yes.
And the movie depicted,
their job is not to dance for you. Their job is to talk to you and get your money.
And the movie depicted that really well, because
yes, it did. It did a very good job
of the girls not pressuring the guys, but convincing them, of going up to them. Hey, how you doing? Hey, oh, you don't have any money? Let's go to the ATM. Let's just grab some money. We'll go get a room. And so it really sells the fact that this is a business for her. This is how she makes her living and her livelihood. The only thing I was a little unclear on is the extracurricular stuff that kind of painted her more as an escort. I wasn't sure, and I don't know if the movie really explains it, or if it had to be explained really, but I was unsure if that's something she does all the time, or if she was making the exception for Vanya, which I'm pretty sure she was making the exception for him because she did like him.
I feel like it felt like that, like that's a normalcy for that type of job. You're doing that job not necessarily because you want to and you enjoy it, but you're chasing that pot of gold. You're trying to find, the one guy, the Richard Gere
Hmm.
that's going to sweep you off your feet and make you, a trophy wife
And
or
you see that
whatever
in
it
her.
is.
She's like bragging to her friends,
Yes,
like,
yes,
"Ooh, girl, I hit the jackpot." Like
right.
I think she's kind of skirting the line. Like at first she saw it as like you said, a pot of gold, and this is her like ticket to, you know, a great life with having money and whatever. But I think she does like him at a certain point. Like
Oh, sure,
she
yeah.
grows to like
She has
him.
to like him. Like, I don't think that, well, and I don't know. I can't speak for women per se, but I don't think women get into that and chase that to just settle down with some guy that has money. They want to like the guy
Yeah, for sure.
whose pot of gold they're chasing, because if they don't like the guy,
Yeah.
then they're just going to be miserable until he's dead or they're divorced. So
Mhm.
there has to be some sort of,
I thought the movie did a really good job of like playing both sides of the fence there with her,
yeah,
like showing her that like, she sure has desires, but like also she ends up liking him. Uh, they're having this like honeymoon vacation, spending a week together and like having fun and partying, and like you said, there's a lot of sex, but I think that sex wasn't just there for like shock value or anything. I think it did actually serve the plot because at one point she says to him, like he's f***ing like a kid. He's just
yeah,
like really fast
rabbit.
about
Yeah,
it and
yeah,
like
yeah.
not doing it in a passionate or compassionate way. And she says to him, she's like, slow down, you'll enjoy it more, basically. And I think that was like a key thing for what happens later in the movie. About midway through, they get married, and Toros, his godfather, sends two goons over to the house, Garnick and Igor, and they send them to basically kidnap Annie and Vanya and force them to annul the marriage. So the two refuse to cooperate, but when Vanya hears that his parents are flying in from Russia to pick him up, he runs away and he abandons Annie at the house and leaves her with the two goons. And like this whole part of the movie was so fucking funny. And I don't
It was
know,
good.
like I know
Really good.
it says it's a comedy. I don't, but I don't know. The movie does such a good job of like veering in and out of like drama and comedy and romance and
Mhm.
back. But this whole part, these two henchmen, especially Igor, and I know he was nominated for an award too, is so
Rightly so.
fucking funny. Yeah. I had originally in my notes, I was like, wow, this is a really interesting take on a rom-com. It's funny and like
Mhm.
they're partying and they're falling in love. I feel like the movie did such a good job. It puts you in the shoes of Annie and sort of made us, the audience, feel like he was in love with us too.
Yeah, this is Pretty Woman with like a demented twist to it,
Because
almost.
the moment he runs away, you realize along with her that like, oh, he never really loved me or her.
Correct.
He was
Right.
just partying, which he confirms a little bit later. She's dealing with these two henchmen. She's dealing with the fact that he left, and she's like, no, he loves me. I'm his wife. Like, we're not getting this annulled. His parents can kick rocks. Eventually, Toros arrives, and he informs Annie that, like, Vanya is just an immature child, and he's been, like, basically babysitting this kid his whole life, and he's caused nothing but problems. Their marriage is a sham. He takes her wedding ring, and he offers her $10,000 if she agrees to go along with the annulment. There's a really funny line here that Toros said. He's like, that room you've been fucking in? That's his parents. He's like, where his room is? It's down the hall with fucking spaceships on the wall. It made me laugh quite a bit. They spend the whole night going to different clubs and some of his hangouts and stuff to try to find him. He's not answering the phone. Finally, they find him, and you realize that like he was never really serious about this. And at one point, they have to fly to Vegas where they got married to annul it with the parents. And he says to her, like, hey, thanks for making my last time in America fun. And she kind of realizes, like, wow, this was all just like a fun game to him, where like for her, it was really like, like she
A chance at security and change, real change in her life.
yeah. And she thought, like, wow, I found somebody who like actually cares about me more than just as a stripper or an object or whatever. So much so that like she holds out hope. She still believes, like, once because he's shit faced when they find him, she believes that he's going to take her side when he sobers up. And you kind of do too. You're waiting for the moment to be like, for have him in that, like, to have that rom-com moment where he like steps
Do the
up
right thing. Yeah.
and tells his parents to fuck off and that he loves her, but he never does. And then that's like that's where the movie takes like that twist, and you're just like, oh, well, this is kind of dark.
You could see that there was something brewing from the whole Igor thing earlier on. He's developing emotions for her because he's seeing the struggle that she's going through, and he's probably seen it before
Mm-hmm.
or something similar, and he just has empathy for her.
Yeah.
And she fucking hates him the whole goddamn time. But slowly, like, she warms up to him, and then, you know, the twist of the movie is they kind of hook up at the end. But
Yeah.
like, it felt pretty obvious that that's where the movie was going. Not that
Yeah, the movie ends with Igor, one of the
henchman.
the henchmen, I guess you could say. And as Dusty, as you alluded to, like during the fight sequence in the house where she's trying to run away, and he keeps like the funny stuff where he ties her up, and it's like, why the fuck are you tying her up? Like, what do you do? He's like, she's gonna try to run. Like he's like, you took it as like him like falling for her. I didn't really take it as that. I kind of just thought like, yes, he feels bad for what she's going through because he's like a nice person, but and also like he sort of like he sees her fire and is kind of like, oh wow, that's like good for her, like she's cool. But I think totally differently about Igor, and it's that he is sort of like her in a lot of ways, working a job and he might not necessarily want to do. He's taking care of his sick grandma. And so they're very similar characters in that sense, that they're just like working class people that get taken advantage of by their bosses or what they do for work and stuff like that. She says to him, you know, you assaulted me, you tied me up, like you kidnapped me, it's assault and battery, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
and he
raped me, you got the rape eyes.
He says like, you know, I just wanted to keep you, I wanted to make sure you didn't hurt yourself. When she says, yeah, you would have raped me if you had the chance because you have rape eyes, he's like, I'm not a rapist. Like, guys, you know. Yeah. So, and there's little moments throughout this night of chaos where he does little nice things. He gives her a scarf because it's cold out. And, you know, slowly but surely you start to see that he's like, sort of like helping her a little bit and like trying to just be gentle with her.
Feels like a respectable human being that is making some money, but also trying to kind of do the right thing. And not.
The movie ends with him taking her to the bank. He gives her the $10,000 of cash that she's owed, part of the deal. And he drives her home. He carries her bags up to the door. And you start to see her realize that, like, oh, he's a pretty nice guy. And the final act of kindness is that he ended up stealing the engagement ring from Toros to give to her. And he gives it to her for two reasons. One, it's a symbol of like, you deserve this because like, fuck these people. You know, they were just not kind. And also like, here, you sell it and make some extra money. $10,000 is nothing for what you went through. So here's where like people have deviating opinions. So once he carries her bags up, she kind of like looks at him and is like, wow, he's a really nice guy. She climbs on top of him in the car and starts to have sex with him. And he goes to kiss her and she kind of like fights him off. She breaks down crying and he holds her while she's crying, and the movie ends that way. And there's no music in the credits. It's actually pretty nice moment where she's just crying and he's holding her through the credits. It's
the big payoff.
I saw a lot of weird, like mixed things about it. Like I never took it as him liking her, right? Like he obviously is a little bit into her, but I saw some people saying like, this is, you know, he was just another fucked up guy because like if he was trying to get in her pants by doing all these nice things and like all this weird shit. And I'm like, do you have any media literacy? Like how is that your takeaway? Or that like him going to kiss her was like aggressive and like he did that's why she cries, because he actually did assault her in that moment because he was too aggressive with pulling her face towards him. And I'm like,
you could argue that he assaulted her. I mean, if you want to argue that that's assault, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I took it completely different in that all she knows is that sex is transactional, and she felt something towards him more than what she realized because she's been shit talking him the entire film. And she kind of feels bad because she kind of realizes that he's in this just as much as she's in this, and like in life, like the struggle of life. And so she like hops on him and he tries to hold her to kiss her because like he actually does, I think, have some feelings for her over the course of their adventure together. It was his birthday. Maybe you don't think he has feelings, but he tried to kiss her and she's pulling back and he's trying to pull her down. like there's a tension there that that's like not her prerogative. That's not what she's used to. That's not what strippers know or do. They don't do that. They don't kiss on the mouth.
Yeah.
And for him to try to do that was a form of breaking
Compassion.
her barrier, but he did break her barrier down in that like he'd realized that that was a step too far, and so he let go and he just held her
Mhm.
and gave her what she needed and not necessarily what he wanted to do. So
Yeah.
that was a huge scene. I loved that scene. It was very
Great way
there
to
was
end the
no
movie.
subtlety about it. It was very deliberate in how it was done, but it was great.
I think it's neither here nor there whether he likes her in any way
Sure,
or
that's
whether
fair.
she likes him, because that's not what the movie was building to, really. Like it's a movie about, like, again, you know, you could argue that like she saw her pot of gold and her opportunity for her golden ticket, but I think it was
Mhm.
more than that. I think it was her being like, wow, this guy actually likes me, this kid. Like, he actually wants me around and wants to marry me. He likes me. Whereas every other man in her life, because of her work, treats her as an object. So when she gets crushed by this kid who she realizes was just treating her the way everybody else does, this ending becomes so much more important. Also, keep in mind, she didn't hop on top of him until he said, she mentioned his car. She's like, this car is like, this is like totally a you car. And he's like, oh, it's my grandma's. And it's the moment she really realizes that he is just like her, because if you remember earlier in
Yeah.
the film, she mentions, I learned Russian from my grandma. So
Right.
you could assume that she was raised by her grandmother, because her mom lives in Miami with her man. And like, you could just tell it's like a fractured family and that her grandmother probably raised her. So she realizes like, wow, he's just like me. But she starts crying when the kiss happens, because she realizes she's trying to use sex as a currency to thank Igor, is really what it is. She's trying to thank him in the only way she knows, in that with sex. That's her form of currency in her life. So she's treating herself really the same way Vanya treated her throughout the movie, and acting as the prostitute that she was accused of being. So, like I said, all her life she used she used sex as a product rather than a means of actual human connection. So, you know, now you have this person who thought she had love with Vanya, but it turned out he was just using her too. So Igor,
Right.
I think, Igor going in to kiss her was like, it's an actual connection. Kissing is like a very
Yep. It's
connective
intimate.
thing. It's an intimate thing. So that's Igor looking for a connection rather than just sex. And I think that realization just kind of like broke her down. Like, wow, an actual human.
Yeah, I guess my only problem with that premise is she comes off as a very experienced stripper, escort, whatever it is that she does.
Yeah.
And I feel like she would be disillusioned because of how long she's been in the industry or what she portrays as in the beginning of the film. I feel like she would be disillusioned about the happily ever after Richard Gere, type story of some rich guy is going to fall in love with me and give me everything. She wanted it to be real, but I think she was very aware that it was her own naivety, I guess, to think that things like that actually happen.
Could
You
have
know what
been.
I'm saying?
No,
Like,
you could be right too. But I don't think in either way, I don't think that changes the meaning of the ending of that, like of what I
oh
said.
no,
is that
absolutely
how,
not.
like,
Yeah, no, we can agree on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt a little different about her. Like, oh, this guy actually likes me or loves me. I feel like after a week, if you're been stripping for a while and
Yeah.
you hang out with a dude for a week and he's like, hey, will you marry me? And he looks your Google name up, like, yeah, I feel like hesitancy might be your first step instead of like, oh, this is the dream come true. This is, you know,
The crying, though, I think is just relief, not hurt or pain or anything like that. And
sure,
it
yes,
was weird to see that interpretation of it online, which is like I don't know, like, what? I was like super baffled when I saw those takes. I was like, what? Like, she's not
yeah.
she's not crying because she was just physically assaulted. It's like she's being embraced by
Mhm.
somebody who's actually a human being.
She's not used to,
Yeah.
well, she's used to not allowing that sort of intimacy because
Right.
sex is transactional. So when he's just trying to be a human with her,
Mhm.
she's not used to that. And so she has to fight against it because
Because-
it's not in her nature.
Yeah, because he didn't see the sex as transactional at that moment.
Sure.
And that's why I mentioned, so if we back up the gravy train a little bit, I mentioned to you earlier, the way Vanya had sex with her is very fast and cold.
Yes.
And
yes.
like, it wasn't inexperience. It was coldness. It lacked the compassion and like the stuff that like, and what I would argue makes sex good. Like if you want to just get off, you could just do it by yourself in the bathroom. Like you don't need another body there with you. That's why that was so important when she tells Vanya, like, slow it down. Because that's the moment she starts to like
and the other
actually
scene
like
where
her.
she's like, you paid for an hour, you know, we could go again. And like 5 seconds later, he's done again. Like, yeah, they drive that point home, and you're right, they make that point, but I still feel like the first 30 minutes, it was a little excessive on all of it.
But again, I'm not arguing that it's excessive, but I think it's like purposefully done because they wanted to drive that point home. That's like, look at all this transactional, cold, passionless sex, and then here's this person at the end who's like, he doesn't see it that way. She climbs on top of him, and he's just like, oh, like we're two human beings who like kind of have like a little spark here. I thought they tackled all these themes and stuff like brilliantly. I thought the movie was completely excellent, top to bottom. Like you said, excellent directing, excellent cinematography. The music was awesome. The acting was fantastic from everybody in it.
The dialogue was hilarious at times, just great.
There wasn't a single thing about this movie that I didn't like or that I would change. And I think it might be the best movie of 2024. I'm not going to lie. It knocked it out of the park and blew me away, honestly. I might have to go out and find me a Russian oligarch. I don't know about you. I could use a life like that. He was just throwing money at her, man. Whew. But this was a great movie. It's got a 7.7 on IMDb. Like we said, it's probably going to clean house at the Oscars. But this is perfect for me. 10 out of 10.
I'll give it a bump. It's an 8.
Okay.
I don't know if I can go much higher than that because of the runtime and a couple other little things. But I'll enjoy it again. I'll sit down with some friends and watch it, talk about it. It's an interesting, fascinating story. I loved it, though.
Well, there you have it, folks. There's our thoughts on Anora, what might be this year's best picture, best director, best everything. It's looking like it might clean house.
Good sweep.
Leave your thoughts down below. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought of Anora. We'd be curious to hear about it, especially what you thought of that ending, because again, I'm dumbfounded that anybody saw that ending as anything other than what I'm fairly confident it was. So let us know what you thought there.